G'day guys, Aaron Lewis here, CEO of P360 and APA Sport and Exercise Physiotherapist. Of late, or over the last few years, certainly the exercises like the hip thruster have become really popular both in gyms and in the rehab settings. Really good at developing some horizontal force to help you run faster. Really good glute-based exercise and also help with the way your lumbo-pelvic rhythm as such is able to work appropriately. So we went on and had a look at developing a few other alternatives or variations of the hip thruster exercise, and we'll go through a few of those here today. So one of the first ones is whenever we do horizontal power-based exercises, or horizontal strength-based exercises, we want to have a look at how we can generate strength off a single leg. Because generally when we're running, we're only taking off one leg at a time, so being able to target one side over the other, or being able to use one independently of the other is really crucial for performance. So we'll have a look first of all at the single leg hip thruster. Just assume our position, onto the shoulder blades into there, get onto the desired leg that we're wishing to train. Find the weights here will be substantially lower than what we're used to from a double leg hip thruster, and from there we're just straight up and back down. From here we can go and do a few other variations. Some of the things we've been working on is how do we develop power for the horizontal frame where we can actually measure the weights that we're putting on. So we can work out a 1 RM weight based on our single leg hip thrust, and from there we can start developing some power-based exercises. So one of the ones that we like in from here is just basically coming up and then jumping through and just doing multiple sets for horizontal power generation. With those ones, you want to be at about 40% of what you can handle for a single leg hip thrust, and maybe just doing sets of 4 to 6 to begin with, still focusing on all the great control so we can maximise the effect we want to get into our glute max muscle. From there we can try a few other more challenging tasks, like doing some alternating from side to side. So from here we go to do our thing, land up onto our left and back onto our right, like that. So alternating the path that we take with the muscles, going from right to left and being able to land and control that one there appropriately. From here we also started to look at a few other more functional exercises we could do, or progressions, utilising more of, say, the calf muscles, which are a really good part of your end stage Achilles rehabilitation, for instance, or coming back from a calf muscle injury. So from here we're looking at the soleus in particular. So we want to keep that nice bent knee, and then from there we're basically doing calf raise, single leg, right up through the big toe, and then landing back down onto the heel. Yes, we're still going to use our glutes and our hamstrings a lot, but we're putting a little bit more pressure or focus on towards the calf muscles. In particular that soleus, which we know is really important in improving our, I guess, our risk of things like Achilles tendinopathy, but also improving our power output for running. Very powerful muscle that we use as we're running. From there, we can also have a look at going to those same positions and now doing high frequency exercises like little hops and stuff like that. Again, really useful for our early stage power component of our Achilles rehabilitation. So we might be able to start these a little bit sooner than doing full-on jumps and hops and things like that, because we can control the weight a little bit more. From there, probably the most intense exercise we'll do with this is again going from side to side on the toes and developing more and more power, speed and high repetitions into our calf. Thank you. So as we go through our Achilles rehabilitation, we want to get to a stage where we can start developing some power into our tendon, so it can handle the things that we need to do to it when we're running, jumping, or any of our sports-based activities. Often we wait really late in the rehabilitation to get started on any power generation because we've got a little bit of fear of pain, the loads we have to put through it when we jump and hop or run are way too extreme, so we end up letting them go. So one of the things we like to introduce quite early is just basically utilising our calf press setting on our leg press and look at some very gentle little push-off exercises. So again, we can sort of set up our weight, keep it on there nice and safe. In from there, we can just do some gentle push and catch based exercises for our calf and Achilles. We can then start loading it up a little bit heavier and then just go down to some sets of 4 to 6 as we go along. Lately I've been a big fan of focusing a lot more on the hip. I think it has a massive role in any of our lower limb and often low back problems that we have. So We've always done great things with the external rotators of the hip, which are these muscles which sit deep down in our backside, but we've never really progressed them into a lot of weight bearing based exercises, which is where we need them to work. So we've come up with this little one here where we're basically standing really low weight to begin with. We sit all our weight onto our right hip, make sure our pelvis stays nice and aligned and nice and straight. And from here, holding on for a bit of support, we're rotating the whole body around. Now this is not a left leg exercise. Here we're actually training the right hip. So keep all our weight on the right, rotate from side to side, and we're feeling those deep hip muscles really work hard to control and move us from there. This is one of the starts that we work on for trying to get some basic strength from a weight bearing position. Really important we try to keep the hip as straight as we can while we work through from there. And it's really important we sort of look at the hip in a similar way to we look at other joints in the body, which means they've certainly got some stability components to it. We've generally ignored the hip though because it's been a pretty stable joint. However, there are a series of muscles that work around the hip in a similar way to the rotator cuff in the shoulder. Basically, we've got a deep hip cuff there as well. And as such, when we get any issues with any of the tendons or the way the hip's meant to be functioning, it might be worthwhile starting to have a look at some of the rotational components that go with the hip and have a look to see if we can train them a little bit better. One of the key ones that we like to look at is how we can control the internal rotators of the hip as we're moving into hip extension, which is basically when our leg or thigh goes behind us. Often we can compensate by changing the way our back works, which is fair enough for some people, but if you've got some real hip issues deep inside the hip and you're unable to do that and you keep overloading parts of your back, it might be an idea to try something a little bit new. So here, we're going to do this little exercise where we basically put this belt around our right thigh, up into here like this, put our whole body, the cable into tension there, support it onto the right hip. I'm just going to hold this for balance to start off with because it can be quite a demanding exercise. We're going to sit all our weight onto the left hip. From here we're going to bend our right knee, sit all the weight back into the leg or into the heel, and we're going to basically drive our hip forward and then come back. Key here is to keep everything nice and straight to target the muscles that we like and come back into there. In particular, you'll feel that through the outside and top parts of the left hip when we're standing on the left hip here like this. So in through, drive up and back down. Try to keep the weight well onto the back heel so we can use our hips to drive ourselves forward. Ultimately, we want to see our shoulder and the front of our pelvis move forward relative to the thigh. So there and back. Attempting a short volume amount of those, maybe sets of 4 to 6. Make sure you're feeling it into that area there. Keep working on those. We can progress into some other weight bearing based exercises for your hip cuff. Thanks a lot. Big fan of doing some very specific exercises for the hip. It's sort of been one of those joints that we've ignored. It's been pretty, we just do bridges and clamshells and all these other cute little exercises. But we decided to have a look at a few more which are a bit more functional and weight bearing as starting points to progress into higher end based exercises like you get into once you start squatting, deadlifting and things like that, which are great exercises. It's just a bit of a precursor into that, especially if you've got some pain in the hips or especially if you're looking to get into or improve things like running and stuff like that. So what we want to focus on is what we basically look at as being the rotator cuff of the hip. It's a series of muscles that start deep in the backside, come up in and around the top and include part of your hip flexor there as well. And all of those muscles together, similar to the shoulder, their job is to look at the intricate movements of the hip and make sure it stays doing the job that it's meant to do so the bigger, more powerful muscles can work off from there. One of the ones we're going to go through today is how the top part of the hip starts to work to control our internal and external rotation as we move in and out of flexion and extension. So to do that today, I'm going to put this resistance band here around my left leg. We're going to focus on my right hip there today. Holding onto this for balance because it can be quite a demanding exercise. So in here with all the tension onto the cable, basically stand onto the right leg, bend our left hip, we sit all our weight back onto the right heel. From here, we're moving our pelvis forward, trying to keep this as straight as we can. So we're not relying on any other movement or pulling through this. This is just here for balance. We're not trying to throw our left leg forward. It stays quite relaxed while we then drive through here and then come back. So again, we're trying to keep all our weight onto the heel. It's a lot more challenging than you would think at first. So from here, all that into there. We'll feel as we go forward, the hip's going to come forward a little bit and then we come back onto it from there. We're going to feel a combination of muscles up around the top and in through the back here as we aim to get that control. Right through. Can be really good for people who tend to find that they're getting a lot of back pain when they're running or doing things like that, as they may not go into that full amount of extension and instead may hyperextend back through the back. So get in from there, all the weight onto the right, drive forward, and then come back. Forward again, and